This is the second episode that we do in English as part of the effort to build a multilanguage community of designers interested in social design, design for social innovation, and emerging areas of design. Diseño y Diáspora will always be a podcast mainly in Spanish, but once a month we will do an episode in English, and we also publish episodes in Portuguese. I decided to start these episodes in English, inviting colleagues with who I worked and share similar interests. With Joanna Saad-Sulonen, we worked for some time in the same research group, Archi, in the Media Lab at Aalto University. Joanna is an architect, designer, and researcher that I admire, and I always follow her work. This talk is for me an opportunity to catch up with her and ask more about what she is doing nowadays. Joanna is a professor at the IT University of Copenhagen in the co-design research group. She's interested in the topic of participation, particularly in how civic participation intersects with participation in the design of digital services and technology. She has been long working in understanding the possibilities for commons-based and communal IT, as well as the processes of participatory IT design. My name is Mariana Salgado. This is Diseño y Diáspora.
Hi, so I'm Joanna Saad-Sulonen, and right now I'm working as an associate professor at the IT University of Copenhagen in the Department of Digital Design. And there I'm teaching service design, and my expertise really is in participatory design, I would say.
How does someone arrive to be a professor in service design?
Oh, it's a long and windy road because my path was not, the linear kind that's incremental steps to lead to an associate professor. So I started really by studying architecture in Lebanon, where I was born and I lived. So I got my bachelor degree from the American University of Beirut. And after that, I worked a little bit as an architect and also did some urban design and landscape design work in a small company. But then life happened and I moved to Finland, which is my mother's country. It was very difficult to work as an architect there, as I hadn't studied in Finland. So I started doing websites and web design. I taught myself to do it. At some point, I found that at the University of Art and Design Helsinki, there was a master's program in new media. And I thought that sounds really interesting. Maybe it's a way I could join my knowledge in architecture and urban design and this new knowledge I had gotten in web design. And I applied, and I remember I presented a project where I took a project I had done in Beirut on the Beirut River, and I made it into an interactive website. And I presented that in my interview at the university, at the Media Lab there, and I was accepted. So I did my master's there. And by good chance, and thanks to our common colleague and friend, Andrea Botero, I joined the Archi research group there. And I continued, as I was in an academic context, I enrolled as a PhD student, and it took me many years to graduate, to get my PhD. I was at the same time working in different projects that the Archi research group was in charge of. And after getting my PhD in 2014, I also went on a visit to Aarhus University with Professor Susanne Botker and her group. I stayed there for a little while, then returned a little bit to Aalto, and then found a job as a postdoc at the Oulu University, and then eventually got an assistant professorship at the IT University in Denmark, and now I'm an associate professor there. So as you see, it's not easy or a straight line.
Perfect. But this is what makes it richer, right?
Yes, I agree. Yes.
So, and what are you doing now? What is your current project?
So right now I am with colleagues from the IT University working on a project that is called CAPE, which stands for Civic Agency in Public E-Service Innovation. And it's a project that is funded by a Nordic fund, which is called Nordforsk. And we collaborate actually with the public libraries in 3 Nordic countries, in Denmark, in Sweden, and in Finland. And we also have colleagues from universities in these 3 countries. And what we're really trying to do with this project is to understand if libraries, public libraries, which are a very strong and important institution in Nordic countries, can they play a role in opening up possibilities for engaging citizens in the design of public services, especially in the context of the digitalization of public services, especially in the context of the digitalization of public services.
But this relates only to the public services related to the library, or this is all type of public services?
No, it's for all types of public services. So, for example, in the case of Denmark, there has been a lot of effort put in actually pushing digitalization of public services quite a lot. And this means that, for example, these electronic IDs that are deployed have played an important role. And we are now in a year where there has been a change from one type of electronic ID to another. We find that this is an interesting example to follow, to try to see to what extent could citizens actually have a say in improving these services or be invited to propose new ones.
Sorry, I want to be specific, so I'm sure that I understand. Because let's say, like when we are talking about this example of the electronic ID, is probably developed by one organization, like in here could be DVB, like that has nothing to do with the library. So the idea is that like the library offers like panels of people that could be able to co-design together with this organization, like the population center, or I don't know what is in Denmark.
Yes, so in Denmark, it would be the Agency of Digitalization. And indeed, this is what we are inquiring. Would it be possible for libraries, public libraries, to provide either spaces or, as you said, the user panels, or put these service developers in contact with existing communities or active groups that are present in the location where the library is? And this is an open question, of course. We don't know yet. We don't have the answers, but it comes from a reflection that, you know, a lot of talk and experimentations have been done around living labs or design labs or innovation labs. And our idea is that there might be no need to create something new if we consider that public libraries are already existing and they are also rethinking their role in the context of digitization. And this might be an interesting area to explore.
In a way, it's like creating the infrastructuring or like the resources in order that participation can take place.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is what I understand, because I also remember that when I was working for the Finnish National Immigration Service, in that moment, we needed to test certain things that, like, for example, we were in the testing period of the chatbot, and then we have invited people to the library. Why? Because it was much more of a neutral place to gather instead of inviting people to our premises. So it was easy to approach people there. Like, we were like in a place that was a little bit more neutral and familiar for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is exactly what we're looking into as well. And libraries are there. They are fantastic institutions. They are, beacons also of democracy. And I think it's worth working with them to explore this potential.
But also, as part of what you are doing, the libraries are going to be like more in contact or in permanent contact and interaction with the activists group.
Yes, because just to take one small example from this project, we are collaborating with the public library of Ballerup, which is a municipality neighboring Copenhagen, and the library is actively already in collaboration with different citizen groups. So, for example, groups of Danes of immigrant background, or young people interested in climate emergency and wanting to do something about it. So the library itself is very active in weaving these collaborations with these local groups. And the question becomes, can this weaving be extended also to put in connection the service developers with these active groups?
Perfect. And I wanted to ask you something, because this is a research project. So you do that because you are a professor and a researcher. But can your students in the university also take part of these projects?
Yes, we actually started, before this project started, we had our students in the Advanced Service Design course, which is offered for master students, to work with the public library of Ballerup municipality. And we invited our contacts from the library to come and give a design brief to the students. And they were really interested at that time in exploring this idea of digitalization in the context of libraries. So that was already done. And of course, our colleagues also from Malmö have integrated part of this research exploration into their own education as well. So this is something we like to do, and we try to do as well.
So, and out of the work of the students, they come out with new concepts that you might develop further in the project, or like how does it work?
It's so far it has worked that the concepts were mostly targeted to the libraries, so the libraries have taken them and worked further with them. One nice also little story that came out from the student work with the library in the context of Denmark, that actually one of the student group continues to do their master's thesis with the library, and one of the students is now employed by the library. So, and he was initially employed as a service designer, which is also something new in the context of municipal libraries.
That's super important, no? Like that you opened this idea that service designers could do something for libraries
in the library context. Yes,
definitely. Sorry, I want to go a little bit back, because I remember that I wanted to talk a little bit more about your doctorate thesis, because this thing of participation and citizen participation has been the topic of your doctoral thesis. So I would like you to tell me a little bit more, what have you done? And because I'm sure it relates to also to what are you doing now?
Yes, yes. My doctoral thesis was called Combining Participations, and if anyone's interested, it is freely available online. And what I was trying to do was to understand if participation in the context of urban planning can be combined with participation in the design of digital technologies. So what does it mean? It means that in the context of urban plannings, in municipalities, in cities, etc., there has been for a long time an interest in involving residents, citizens, in having a say in how the environment where they live or work would look like, right? And depending on different municipalities, you might have low level of participation. So the planners will just at the end of a process of designing, something for an area, they would open the possibilities for citizens to have a say, right? So that's at the lower level of, this ladder of participation. But there is also interest in having more engagement from the parts of citizens. So engaging them more early on in the process of planning or throughout the process of planning. And of course, with the rise of, online tools and digital technologies, it has naturally come to the point where urban planners, city authorities have been interested in using these online tools to get feedback or proposals, suggestions from citizens. So my question was, can we also work on collaborative design of these digital tools that would be used for citizen participation in the context of participation in urban planning? And I've had several cases where I collaborated with the city of Helsinki, where, for example, they were working in one neighborhood of Helsinki and wanted to ask citizens specific input regarding, for example, traffic safety, let's say. And during this process, we also integrated the development of an online tool, which we called the Urban Mediator. And that was part of one of the EU-funded projects we were working on in the Archi group I mentioned earlier.
So Urban Mediator was the tool?
Was the tool, yes, that we were co-designing as part of this EU-funded project, and that was used in several little cases in collaboration with the city of Helsinki, or later also in collaboration with citizen groups that were working independently in neighborhoods of Helsinki that wanted to, for example, collect data and information from the residents of that area to be able to take it and say it to the urban planners, to tell them, look, we have gathered this information and we can show you that there are this and these problems. So the Urban Mediator was co-designed and co-developed through a period of 3-4 years in collaboration with urban planners and with citizen communities through these cases. So it was an example of, as the title of my thesis said, combining these different types of participations.
But you, in the thesis, part of your work was kind of like making categories about the types of participations that could be as part of an urban planning project, right? Or as part of participating in the development of a digital tool. What are these categories of participation?
Actually, what I developed was a matrix of participation, which had in one of the axes was categories or levels, if you want, of participation in urban planning as we know it from literature and practice. And it's ranging from no participation at all to participation as consultation, which means that the authorities, the urban planners, tell the citizens, we have done that. This is our proposal. You can say whatever you want about it. Maybe we react or maybe we don't react, right? So that's one level of participation. And then another one is more like what we would call co-design, meaning it's participatory urban planning, where urban planners are inviting groups of citizens to workshops and walking tours, whatever, so that they integrate the ideas of citizens into the urban proposals. And then what I suggest as yet another level is this self-organizations. And I propose that self-organizations of citizens is a type of participation. It's a participation that starts from the bottom up, meaning it's the citizens themselves that are coming up with the issues that needs to be discussed and addressed. So it's not the urban planners or the municipalities that are saying, hey, here there is an issue, what is your opinion? In self-organization, it's this bottom up that groups of citizens are noticing, we have traffic problems in our neighborhood because of this traffic light, because of the lack of a zebra crossing here, etc. And they bring it to the planners. And what's interesting in the matrix, this is reflected also in the way we understand participation in the design of information technologies. And it's the same thing, but it's a different world. You see, in terms of disciplines, urban planning is one discipline and design of IT is another. And again, in the design of IT, you have the same thing. You have either non-participation or similar kind of consultation, which I would parallel to, user testing, for example. It's like you do something, then you ask people to test it and tell you, is it working or not, etc. Then you have more co-design with workshops, all kinds of tools and techniques that we use. And parallel to self-organization, there is something in design literature that we refer to as design in use. So it's when some designed artifact or service is put out into the world. It's the thing that people who are using it can continue to design it, for example, through adaptations, And that is something we tried with the urban mediator. Working at a level as we, as the designers, we took the role of meta designers, which is also a concept found from the design literature, saying that we are offering possibilities for people to adapt and create new functionalities in the urban mediator so that it fits their needs, while they are using it. So that these two axes form the matrix of multiple participation.
So this idea of the meta designer, it's the one that make the mise en scène for the others to design. So, it is you when you are designing something that is enough open and flexible that the others can produce this design in use.
Yes, it's a meta design. I mean, it's a term that refers to the possible role of the designer. So a designer can choose to be a meta designer if their designs are, as you said, made adaptable or open for others to further design. So it's the opposite of a designer that is proposing, closed systems or things that are, impossible to change without returning back to the initial designers.
Is it also right that something of this new role of designers that you propose is that designers, we should be supporting citizens' activism and citizens' self-organization?
Yes, that's very much at the heart of what I believe, right? So I have, and it's something that's continuous in my work, also trying to understand what is the role also of the designer in such contexts where those who are funding or supporting whatever system of or service that we are designing are not the citizens, but then the designers are coming to say, but we want the citizens to be involved. We want the citizens to have a say, you know. So, so what is then the role of the designer who is you know, considering the communities, the citizens, and also to a certain extent, and something I have worked with good colleagues, is commons. You know, how can design take place in a context of commons where we're talking about shared resources, non things that, you know, are not owned by only by specific groups of people, but rather shared and nurtured together.
But why commons is important to design?
I think we are at a time when commons is important to design because of the state of the world. So maybe it's a bit ambitious to say it, but we are at a time when, you know, the planet is in a very difficult situation. We don't know what the future holds, right? Climate emergency is here. And some of the faults might be in, you know, in design decisions we have taken in modernity and the industrial ages, right? So, I mean, if we think of plastics, for example, how could we ever think that plastics would not go away? But, and they're still here and they're causing harm, right? So, I think the commons are important now because they offer an alternative way of understanding production, consumption, ownership, working in a collectivity rather than individual, you know, this individual approach. I don't know if it has the answers, but I think it's worth exploring now. It's the time.
But this is also a bet as a contra reaction of what is going on, that each time we have people that are more richer and the gap within like the poor and vulnerable populations and the rich is getting bigger, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So how can we work together for the common good, right? So how to consider that, you know, the future, our own future actually, because of the future of our planet is at our stake. How can we work together outside of these models of you know, private ownership that have not worked? We see that this has not worked, and the work of people who have studied the commons, but also people who are active in the commons, has shown, you know, that there are ways, there are models, there are approaches for that work in working together, in working collaboratively, in working in a collective for a public good. It's not easy. It requires effort, but it's something that we can learn from. And I think this is something that designers can learn from, because design as we know it, especially in the West, right? For us, design comes from the industrial times and the modern period, right? And design has so much been about individual designers and consumerism, and also about, you know, who is paying for these designs. You know, it's money, basically. It's a business.
This interview will be added to the list D&D in English, Investigación en Diseño, Dinamarca y Diseño, Finlandia y Diseño, Diseño de Servicios y Diseño y Gobierno. Joanna brings the role of the meta-designer into the conversation, a designer that sets the stage to others to design. This designer offers opportunities, spaces, infrastructures, and methods for citizens to have an active role in decisions that concern them. In the case of Joanna's work, the collaboration happens with self-organized group of citizens. In the case of my work, for example, it happens in collaboration with colleagues and stakeholders that could possibly influence in policy making. Do you have a role of the meta-designer? I guess this is not always, and we change our role in different projects and different contexts. But to better understand our practices, help to rethink them, even we could talk about designing these roles. Let's continue listening to Joanna, that has a lot more to tell us about her research. But tell me one thing, because I always want to go to the concrete, and you have explained me very concrete examples from all the other things, but I would like a concrete example about these commons. So do you have any project in which, or in mind, it doesn't need to be your own, but something in which design and design work has been significant in order to promote commons?
For me, I have worked very much in the small, at very small level with colleagues like Andrea Botero, Sanna Martila, but also colleagues from Aarhus. We have looked at examples of things like urban gardening, for example, which can be considered a commons in an urban space, so an urban common. And there, more than saying how can design support the commons, it was, to me at least, I know for other colleagues it might mean something else, but for me it was, what can a designer learn from commoning practices? For example, if you take the urban gardening context. So how do people self-organize? What are the challenges that take place when in such a context? And meaning, how can then we learn from that in a design context? So if we're thinking of designing services that are that would be of use for the general public, for example, that they might be public services, but they might also be services that are developed in collaboration between the commons or commoners or people who are working at the grassroots levels on the ground and the public service developers. So what if such a case happens, and there is interest in that, for example, in municipalities, how can we collaborate with volunteers, seniors who have reached retirement age and would want to be productive. So how can we put in place these collaborative practices so that they also remain fair and to all of those involved? And we learned from commons and commoning that it requires, for example, to have sets of shared rules that are put in place. So this is one thing that design can learn from commoning, that you cannot just start it like that. One of the first steps can be in co-creating these shared rules. So I think this is very important, so that there's no, taking advantage also of others, either within a group of, say, a community of citizens, but also between citizens and I'm taking the example of public authorities here.
Oh, super interesting. And where do you think all this type of research is going in the future?
I don't know. Well, I hope maybe, I don't know where it's going, but what I hope is that there's more and stronger collaboration between what is happening in design research and what is happening on the ground. So, for example, I'm thinking of, this rising interest of public authorities in everything related to, for example, service design, co-design. You suddenly, there's a whole like area of practice which is situated in the public sector that is now interested in design, right? And I hope that there is more collaboration and interaction between the design research and the practitioners that are interested in design, because I think the design research can bring a lot, because we know a lot of examples, and we have a historical perspective also on these things. And on the other hand, I think we learn a lot from what people are doing on the ground in new areas where design is developing. So I think it's super interesting.
Yes, something that happens as part of my work in the ministry is that whenever you say the word research, they immediately connect with research in social science or research in relation to technology. But when we think in, hey, let's ask researchers to help us with that, they would never think about design researchers.
No, so yeah, maybe we can say, thanks to your podcast, that design researchers are here and eager to collaborate. Yes.
That's a good one, because of course, like in general, when in the public sector we think about design and designers, it's in relation to implementation and with a very practical framework, right? Like the whole idea is that because designers, we are practical people. At the end, we make things and we make things happen, and we know how to follow up with things and develop things. Then it might be confused with this idea that we don't necessarily are such good researchers.
Yes, and on the other hand, I think a lot of design researchers also have this practical side, right? So because we also do design work, and there is this idea of research through design, that it's not just research for design or research about design. We also do research through design, which I think is also very interesting and useful.
Yes, and we need more of people doing research through design in the public sector, right? Like as a way to demonstrate and legitimate the possibilities that.
Absolutely.
If we want to read about these things, what are you reading nowadays? What are you listening? What do you recommend us?
Well, I was just at the Design Research Society conference in Bilbao, so my head is full of the wonderful presentations that went on there.
Who should we follow?
I think you should go on Twitter and follow the hashtag DRS 2022 or hashtag DRS 2022 Bilbao. Also, I would recommend that you follow in autumn the upcoming participatory design conference. It will mostly be online, but also part of it will be in Newcastle, and part of it will be in what is called PDC Places, is a new concept. So, for example, we will have a PDC place in Copenhagen, Malmö, and Helsinki, where some activities will take place in, I think, 27th and 28th of September.
And it will be also in Puerto Rico.
In Puerto Rico, in Turkey, in many, many other places. So do have a look at Participatory Design Conference.
But what does it mean that it has so many satellite cities nowadays? So
look, it's an experiment. It's an experiment. We will see how it will work out. But for example, in the PDC Nordic that we have in Copenhagen, Malmö, and Helsinki, we will have some workshops. Some will be online. with libraries. Some will be kind of face-to-face, related to the topics of public digitization of public services, also the roles of volunteers. And we are planning, we hope it will be possible to offer an overview of published conference papers on the topic of digitization of public services. So we will create like a little, a panel in Copenhagen. I think that will be about that. So go and check the PDC places that are nearest to you. They might be something of interest.
Thank you a lot for the interview. Joanna says that the public sector is now interested in design. And I would add that we designers and researchers are super interested in understanding what could be our contributions to public sector. In Finland, for example, we have a network of designers and people interested in design work in the public sector. At the moment, we are more than 600. We have had this network for 5 years now, and it continues to grow. We are all public servants working at national municipal level or city level. I have been part of this network from the beginning, and I'm interested in how it grows and develops. One of my future interviews in English will be to one of my colleagues managing this network. During the pandemic year, for example, we had uninterrupted online activities. We organized weekly sessions in which we tell each other what are we doing, we invited in special guests, and we work as a support group coaching each other. More on this will come. Something else I want to comment in relation to the work of designers in the public sector is about the collaboration from researchers and civil servants. A lot of the work that happens in the public sector is documented and reflected in academic forums. We need more of this. In my case, I have to say that always that researchers want to interview or write together, I am thankful. I had very little time for writing and reflecting nowadays on my daily design practice. This is why these collaborations have been key for making this space, giving time, and of course finding people with who to reflect on these topics. Hope this is also the case for others. As always, the music of the podcast is by Antonio Zimmerman. Sound design is by Julian Pereira. This podcast is published with Creative Commons license with attributions. This is Diseño y Diáspora. You can follow us in our social media channels in YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter, or visit our website. Remember to recommend us and recommend our books. Let's listen to the next one.